microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, that guy, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to have to breeze two together. Whenever I try to prove out, you know, it's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really can't be serious. Is this really want things to be? Come on, more hooker, eruptions, eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers, kind of.
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2 or 3 within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And yes, I would like to know why it takes 15 or 50 or whatever, so many years to get the revelations out there. Good evening, everybody. This is live on UCY.TV radio. I am Chuck Ochelli. You are listening to the Ochelli Effect. Anyway, all of that kind of stuff aside, welcome, everyone. Even though the mainstream media is just starting to catch up to the kind of stuff that we've been discussing on this network and on many other networks. They're now actually focusing on the Ebola virus. They're actually focusing on the fact that we've got people in the United States who are afflicted with it and how they got it. And of course, there's actually something that looks like sympathy for the people of Gaza. How interesting. That wasn't the position not too long ago, or maybe I'm just, out of my mind. Well, there's no maybe about it. But I don't really care. Tonight, of course, I have a rather fascinating guest. I had a little bit of a difficulty today because of thunder, lightning, electrical disturbances, and all kinds of other fun stuff. So, if technology will allow it, I am going to bring on Maria Heller once again, and we'll have ourselves another fascinating discussion, I hope. And I'm sure that we will. Of course, this was the lady that was replayed while I was off when the baby was born. And I really enjoyed the interview I did with her. I can't remember exactly when it was now, but I think it was a couple of months ago. And then I did one on her show. So we're going to just have a little bit of a chat and see how this goes. Let's see if I can get Maria on with me. Anyway, it is definitely a fascinating time. And, it's really interesting to check the evolution of what the mainstream is doing versus what the rest of us, and I'm just going to call it the rest of us at this point, because there's a lot of people that I don't necessarily want to be lumped in with, but I'll tell you what, it is interesting to see where it's all going, because we are definitely, the newer media, that's for sure, and the dinosaur that was is now playing catch up with us, as I was saying earlier. And I think I have Miss Heller with me.
Hi, Charles.
Ms. Heller, excuse me.
Thanks for the correction.
Yes, very quickly there. They're very quickly that time. I'm so glad you could come on with me because I know that what's on my mind is probably sort of dancing across yours a little bit, and there's a whole lot of other interesting things to discuss, and we'll just sit back, relax, and see where it goes, like always, right?
Absolutely. Why not?
See, I try not to press people when I have them come on my show. I never do. It's just one of those things where, you know, the only sort of, you know, pressure there is that we are live. That's the only thing. I don't tape. I just do it live, and then it drops later as a recording, you know. But I kind of like the spontaneity and the sort of, you know, inability to edit or anything else. It just suits me for some reason.
Good. Hey, I've never edited my show in 14 years.
Well, you know, that's true. You're one of those people that doesn't edit a single thing out. Even when you and I started meandering off into odd areas, you just kind of changed the title of the show and dropped it as something else. So,
what's the difference? I think people like the spontaneity. I think a lot of people have always said to me, you know, the people they hear on my show say things on my show they never say anywhere else.
Yeah, see, that's the odd thing that I get, too, because, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I had Suzanne Posel on Thursday, and, I mean, we wound up actually devoting a little bit of time to discussing the Flintstones, okay?
Did you know that the Flintstones was actually the first adult cartoon in America?
Well, I knew it was the first cartoon that was running in prime time, but I wasn't aware that it was the first adult cartoon.
It was the first one for adults, and it used to air on Friday nights after the children were asleep.
Well, yeah, and, you know, I also made note of the fact that they actually used to do cigarette commercials where Fred and Barney would walk off of the, you know, supposed Flintstones set and pull out a pack of Winstons and light up.
Right. Well, those were the days. Now all you get is fast food commercials and medicine, of course, all kinds of prescriptions.
Oh yeah, you name it. You know, whether it's male enhancement or it's you know, well, you know what else is out there though too is all those lawyer commercials for the medicines mostly. But,
right, right. That you have your hip replaced. Guess what? Your hip's been recalled.
Oh yeah, and the more disturbing ones, which are really elaborate, is about the vaginal mesh and all this other stuff now too. Those are you know, kind of almost too graphic for when I was a kid on TV. They would never have discussed this kind of stuff even in a commercial.
Right. Hey, when I was a kid on TV, Lucy and Tessie had to sleep in separate beds.
That's right.
Now today it's anything goes, you know. I'm actually became like numb to sex scenes. I'm like, okay, what happened to the screen blacking out? I prefer it.
Oh yeah, you know, there used to be a day when you could, you know, it would drop away and you'd be looking at the curtains rustling in the breeze or something.
Right, but you knew what was happening. You know, you didn't have to see everybody's junk. You know, after a while, you're like, come on, I've seen enough of this already.
Well, yeah, well, you know. But you know, it kind of doesn't disturb me so much, the sex scenes, I've got to tell you, because to me the depictions of graphic violence are much more disturbing than anything else, especially when you know, they like to aspire now sort of the anti-hero status to a lot of people in movies, and they sort of put the viewer in a position to have to root for the bad guy.
Well, how can you help but root for the bad guy or the underdog anymore today?
Well, see,
except the fact we're the bad guys.
Yeah, well, that's the scary part, right? I mean, I always looked at it as, and again, I grew up in a different era than we're looking at now, but I always looked at it as usually the person who was being portrayed as the bad guy. See, I should have known I was going to do this kind of stuff later in life, because the guy that I always saw being portrayed as the bad guy, I always wondered what really was the political motive of the people that were writing the script, you know?
Right, right.
You know,
well, you know, when I was a little kid, I used to like Westerns, but I still do. But I always rooted for the Indians and never for the cowboys. That might have been my big clue.
Oh, well, that's a huge clue. But, of course, the Indians, and, of course, you're not allowed to say that anymore, but what we called Indians at the time weren't really the bad guys, but, again, the script says.
Twisted history.
You got it. You got it. And I'll tell you, it's been a very trying time, you know, since we last spoke. Couple of interesting pieces of feedback, though, because actually when I was off for the baby, they replayed you. I mentioned this in the opening of my show, but I didn't have you in on the call at that point. That there was actually some interesting feedback from the replay. There were some people out there that thought that you had quite the sexy voice, I want to tell you.
You know, when I was first approached to do radio, that's when Jack Blood was doing live radio, managing radio stations. He was my producer. You know, I couldn't even imagine that anyone could stand listening to my voice because I don't know anybody that likes their own voice.
Yeah, I can't stand mine either. I always think I'm talking through my own nose. That's what I sound like to myself, you know. Too nasally, way too nasally. I don't know if that's just an Italian thing or what, but
maybe it is. Who knows? We have Roman noses. They roam all over our faces.
That's it. Even though I am Sicilian, just like you. So you never know where the hell actually we came from. So we don't necessarily all carry the same traits.
I know, but my father used to tell my mother that she was black because he said, Sicily had been invaded so many times, and especially by the Turks. So that was an argument because he was Napolitan from Naples, and he was very white. And my mother is, she was a real dark-eyed, dark-hair Sicilian. You couldn't miss it. So somewhere in the middle, all his little girls fell. Some of us look like her, some of us look like him.
But it's a beautiful thing, It's like they used to call the United States the melting pot. I think that Sicily was really like the original melting pot,
Oh, really? Absolutely. The other night, you might want to watch this movie. I watched a movie called No God, No Master. And I'd like your listeners, too, also, because I was impulsed to take notes, and it was a regular movie. It wasn't a documentary. But it's New York City in 1919. And it shows, how corrupt the politicians were, how wicked the cops were, just like today, and the Italian immigrants, and how they were rounded up by 10,000 by corrupt politicians to try to deport them. And they basically lived in slave labor. And the story is about them doing package bombs at all our favorite people's homes. John Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, all the slave drivers of the day. So it's quite a bit of history on many levels. And an entertaining film besides that.
And how fascinating it is that this kind of thing is surfacing. And this is a new film, I assume, right? I haven't seen it.
2012. I watched it on Netflix the other night.
Nice. Well, but again, this is where we see the echoes of things and ahead of time. We'll start to see the different sympathies develop. I mean, after all, immigration is a very large discussion right now. But I'm also fascinated by the idea that I turned on, okay, now I'm sorry, but I turned on CNN today and just decided to sit there and watch it for a little while, okay? And, it was really amazing to me to watch an almost sympathetic CNN for the people in Gaza. I mean, after all, there's only been about 1,200 people killed over there,
18, last count, 1,800 killed, 9,000 injured.
Oof. Well, see, you've got a higher number than I do. I always try and be conservative about these things because I don't want to, be told I'm exaggerating, but it's kind of hard not to exaggerate because you're only talking about a couple of dozen Israeli soldiers that have been killed.
Yeah, but they're soldiers. They volunteered to be killed. These are women and children and fathers and uncles and grandpas they're killing.
Well, exactly my point. And meanwhile, there's the parallel where they had this Israeli soldier that had supposedly been captured, and they were making a big deal out of him. Now, just before we went to air, it was announced that they confirmed he's dead.
He's a soldier. Soldiers die. If you're stupid enough to sign up, then that's the price you pay. I don't want to sound too cold, but that's the facts. You got a lot of Israeli reservists that are called the refuse-necks that refuse to go to war. They put themselves in jail instead of fighting this criminal genocide.
Which is exactly what's happening. And I mean, they're talking about having to blow up tunnels, and gee, we're so sorry that the civilians are getting injured, but of course Hamas is using them as human shields. And, but the whole thing to me, though, was stunning only because I had, up to this point, really not seen a lot of sympathy in the mainstream for any Palestinians. It just
they have to now. They have to now. The entire of all of Latin America. I mean, the whole world, 100,000 protesters in London, the whole world is turned on Israel. So now even the Zionist puppets, the people that just read the news, the actors that read their scripts and call themselves journalists or news people, have to go along with it. Because they're probably going to be too afraid that they might end up getting, getting mugged or death by citizen after their show.
You got it. See, this is the amazing thing. I just have you on, and I can throw something out there, and then you're going to say what I want to say, but better. I don't know why that happens, but
I don't know about that. I just say what comes out of my head.
Well, me too, but I'm just saying, you're just right there. You're saying exactly where I'm going with this, and I knew you would. That's why I kind of brought it up, because...
Well, listen, Charles, since I was a young girl, I grew up before Vietnam. Okay, I was born right after World War II.
Right.
And all I've seen is war my whole life, 64 years of the same shit. And we're supposed to believe that the human race is evolving. I mean, to me, we're just crashing and burning. We get more and more animalistic as the years go by.
And it seems, and I don't know how to really sort of articulate this, but it just seems to me to be like almost childish with the way that a lot of this stuff is being conducted. There is the campaigns which are meant to demonize certain individuals, which are meant to then justify the brutal slaying of civilians. Especially in the situation we're talking about now. I mean, it's meant to justify it.
Well, all these kind of wars, whenever they start, the first thing they have to do is demonize the enemy. They have to relate them, to call them animals or different names. We did it in Vietnam. We called them gooks or spooks, or we came up with so many nasty names. The Palestinians referred to as cockroaches. You have to dehumanize the population you intend to wipe out. And it works. It seems to work every time. And, it's interesting because when I post the pictures of all the dead children, especially one that I posted with a little baby with his head blown off, people got pissed off at the picture. And I said, you know what, if this picture bothers you, then the reality on the ground, you need to get off my page. Go over to AIPAC and kiss their ass like Congress does.
Well, precisely, and this is the thing: the image bothers you, but not the act. It's sort of like they'll go after you for posting something or saying something about it, as opposed to actually standing up and saying, hey, this is enough already.
Right.
Why there isn't a greater outcry when it comes to this stuff? And you're right. I mean, in my lifetime, of course. Starting in World War II, of course, you had the whole, again, the dehumanization of the enemy there, and I say that history is still quite redacted. But
oh, absolutely. I mean, all we hear about is the Holy Holocaust of World War II, with the same figure the Jews throw out constantly, 6 million. It must be their favorite number, of which they have no evidence, and there weren't even 6 million Jews in all of Europe at the time. But what about the 10 million Russians that died, the 20 million Chinese that died? Nobody talks about that. It's just they're the holy Holocaust, and everybody else's Holocaust, including the one they're doing to the Palestinians, doesn't rate.
Well, exactly. And I mean, body counts are body counts, but I mean, it's just amazing to me. Like I said, I grew up during the Vietnam era, the close of the Vietnam era. I was born into that. So, as I've told you before, and of course, we've kind of been over that a little bit as far as, the distance in our age and how it is. A couple of your listeners believe that I was probably your son in a past life.
Maybe you were. Maybe you were. God knows I'm proud of you in this life as if you were my son.
Listen, I appreciate that. And, a lot of the people that have been looking at the Facebook page, for the Ochelli Effect, by the way, Maria is one of the people who actually posts on there, okay, which I was very, very happy when she accepted my invitation to do so, because she provides me with a greater depth as far as my voice goes when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And I really appreciate all that, by the way, Maria. You really posted some incredible stuff.
Well, that's my pleasure. I don't post any of the stuff that I know, draws the hate to me on my page. What's really funny is, now that I've come out, against Israel, nobody's calling me a Jew, and you can add as many words as you want behind that. I've heard them all. I've been called them all. Just because my last name is Heller. Okay, that was my last husband's name, and I used it for business for 20 years. I wasn't going to change it. And I thought that I put the hell in Heller, so why not keep it? But nobody's calling me a Jew bitch anymore. Now they're calling me worse things. And I'm like, people are so stupid.
Oh, yeah, I loved it. I recently got an email about how not only was I a Jew, but I was also a Satanist. I love that.
With the name Ochelli, they accusing you of being a Jew.
Well, that's what cracked me up. I said, honestly, how many Sicilian Jews do you think there really are?
Right.
But okay, no problem.
Well, look, people have to understand there's a huge difference between Judaism, which is a religion, and Zionism, which is a political movement.
Right.
And to clump all Jews into Zionist is wrong, because you have a lot of Jews, especially in New York, that have been protesting this slaughter on the Palestinians since it started. So Judaism, a belief system. Zionism, a political system. And the top Zionist is the Rothschild family, which owns all the money in the world and funds both sides of every war.
Well, you got it, and this is the amazing thing to me, is that really the reason why I started getting this sort of too much with the Jew support is because I said something very much like what you just said, which is that look, Judaism is not necessarily the same as Luciferianism. That is not to say that there aren't evil Jews. That's not to say that there aren't evil everybody. And I was kind of being fair about it. I mean, I used to wear a T-shirt very proudly that said, I am not prejudiced in any way. I hate everybody equally.
Hey, I've used that expression since before you were born.
Well, maybe the guy who made the T-shirt got it from you. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? I'm sure there's plenty of T-shirts with my slogans on them out there in the world. But, people just don't. They're lazy. They're stupid. They're willfully ignorant because they won't read real history. They won't learn the facts. They're only going to go by their belief system. The word lie is in the middle of the word belief. And they don't want anybody to rattle their cage because they're so sure of what they think they know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the whole discussion, about this kind of stuff and people's belief systems, I mean, realistically, people do gravitate toward particular points of view for a reason, I'm watching the evolution of my teenage daughter, which means that, I can't really have a conversation with her at this point. But just by virtue of the fact that she's my teenage daughter and, that's kind of normal. But I'm watching her very much entrenched, sort of, in what I would consider to be more mainstream liberal thinking. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel bad about it at this point. She doesn't think I'm entirely nuts, but she disagrees with me on a lot of things.
That's okay.
And I said, that's fine.
She's pushing her boundaries. That's the age they do it. I mean, there's an old expression, when you're 16 or 17, you think your parents are the dumbest people in the world. And then when you're 25, you think they're brilliant. So you just got to wait a couple more years.
That's what I'm hoping for. But, to watch her with her feet dug in, sort of like, with that stuff, it's kind of funny to me because I remember now that when I was much younger, this was sort of my leaning. I kind of led, in a way. I believed in law and order, and I kind of believed in, I had that foolish trust in the state at one point in time, which I'm sorry, but a lot of people begin life like that.
Right.
But I did believe that, people should be allowed to live their lives and do what they will, so long as they don't injure anyone else. I kind of had that feeling, and when it came to, legislation and social policy that led to the infringement, let's just say, of people's right to express themselves, I was revolted by that, and that kind of landed me more in a liberal sort of camp, at the time.
Mm-hmm. Where did you grow up, Charles?
Grew up mostly in the state of New Jersey.
Oh, okay. So were you like in the country, where there was grass and trees and things like that?
No, I was kind of in a rougher area, which was, somewhere between not quite urban and not quite suburban. One of those kind of areas where, generally speaking, most of the towns I lived in, actually the tone of my skin made me a minority.
I was the minority all the way through school. You know, just being a woman and being Italian, because you were either Jewish or you were black. So, you know, I had that distinction of being, you know, no, or somewhere stuck in the middle. But I was a minority, and I had faced a lot of prejudice. In actuality, my best friends were the black kids. Because, I gotta say, I hate to say this, but the other kids, they were the kind you wanted to beat up in the schoolyard after school.
Yeah, that experience hit me too when I ended up in some places where I wasn't so outnumbered. Let's just say, you know, from the black and white sort of perspective. Realistically, there weren't a lot of Italians, though.
Right. Well, let's go back in time a little bit. My childhood was in an Italian ghetto. I can't really call it a neighborhood, an Italian ghetto in Brooklyn, New York, where we had West Side Story on a regular basis. You know, the Italians duking it out with the Puerto Ricans. We had, you know, gunfire. We had gangsters. We had cops that were, you know, you can pay them off. You know, when you got your driver's license when I was a kid, I was probably 17, 18, I was instructed by my friends to always keep a $100 bill right behind my license in my wallet in case I got stopped by a cop. You know, when some of my friends, believe me, they took that $100 bill quite a few times. And then when some of my friends got busted or arrested for petty charges, you know, the cops beat the crap out of them. Okay, and then you'd have to go find a bail bondsman. And he would tell you how much the judge wanted to get paid off to let him go when he goes before the judge. So this was my childhood. Okay, so we're looking at mid to late 60s in Brooklyn, New York. Now, I extrapolate that to 2014 and look at the police now. They're 1,000 times worse. The justice system 1,000 times more corrupt. So I never trusted the cop on the beat or the justice system because I grew up learning different.
Yeah, this is where a little bit of commonality comes in. Now, it's going to sound way different, Maria, but the reality is just about the same. Where I grew up, you know, what was, you know, prevalent there were groups of, let's just say, the outlaw biker type guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up in that culture, okay, where, believe me, the same payoffs were still present in the later 70s and the early 80s. And quite honestly, you know, because of the rougher situations there and everything, I mean, I was actually involved in some of that crap and was always instructed to keep some money up front whenever, because this way, it was actually, I think it was still the same $100 bill.
Right, pay as you go.
You know, and it still worked, but you see, we had like a shirt pocket up front, and if you had that there, even if you were cuffed or whatever else, and you just kind of gestured down, you could get yourself out of it. Mm-hmm. And this was the way that this went. Some people don't believe me when I say this now because the obvious sort of, you know, cash grab is not necessarily there with the dashboard cams and everything else. But these guys have now gotten way worse as far as, you know, beating the crap out of somebody for very small things and everything else, and they
tasering you to death, shooting grandmothers in the street on the side of the road. I mean, crazy, and killing dogs. Let's not leave that out. Right. It's like there's a war on dogs. You know, when did cops become such pussies? Is what I want to know.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, and again, there were more. People always say to me, well, you know, what about the good cops that are out there? Well, you know, they're not standing up and policing themselves as a group.
Right, they're not exactly Serpico.
Exactly. This is the thing. And, you know, when you look at it, you know, as it stands now, there are still some good guys out there. And I even said, you know, on my show when I had a dealing with an officer recently, I called out his name. I told him, please listen to my show. You know, wrap your mind around this. He's a young guy and everything, but he was actually doing his job in that old school sort of way that we were taught the police were supposed to be doing it. You know, the concept of protecting and serving. But
that went out the window a few years ago. The motto is no longer protect and serve. They're now law enforcement officers. And you see when they get investigated, their chief will always say they just did what they were trained to do. So we are now all suspect. We're all the enemy. And I do feel sorry for the few good cops out there. It's not a career I would recommend to my son.
No, neither would I. And now I have two sons, and got to be honest with you that even when my first son was born in 2002, I still felt as though that type of a profession was still a good possibility and a strong job for him and everything else like that. And I would have even encouraged him to follow that sort of old little boy dream. I don't know what goes on nowadays. I'm almost afraid to find out with Frankie now, because he's only just a little over a month old. But I do ponder the future quite differently now than I did in 2002.
Well, yeah, because your other kids are grown and they can handle themselves if they have to. But now you have an infant. And let me tell you, I saw your son's picture. And I looked at that baby and, first of all, could not believe how alert he is. And when I looked at his eyes, I said, oh, my God, what an old soul. This kid's like 100 years old already. Yeah. So I don't think you have to worry about him. I think he's going to be one ass-kicking world leader.
And I'm thinking to myself, it's a lot of hubris, but I kind of feel the same way looking down at him. In fact, he kind of squints at me every once in a while, and I almost swear the expression says, Dad, son, what's wrong with you? and that's good, because you know what? I want my son to look at me like as if I am probably the biggest fool in the world, because he is so much more advanced and so much more in tune with the world than I am. That's what I want.
Look, there are a lot of old souls returning to this planet now to fix the foobar that this planet has turned into. And when you look at some of the reports, I don't know if you follow the millennial generation, they are so different from their parents' generation, let alone my generation. They reject everything outright, these kids. They reject government control. They reject the institution of marriage. They reject racism. They reject sexism. They're just so smart. To me, they're perfect. And it's like, wow, we just got to let this world exist long enough for these kids to become adults.
Well, see, that's why I brought up my daughter earlier, because that's where she's at, pretty much, is rejecting everything. Good.
Too bad for you, though, because I know what it's like to raise a pistol like that. I have a few of my own.
It's a beautiful thing, and it really does give me some hope. I mean, I'm still waiting for it to open up her mind a little bit, but then again, since, and I'm going to say this, I know this is going to sound terribly sexist, but since she's a woman, I know very well I have no control over what she does with her mind. So,
well, I don't think that's sexist. I think it's a fact. It's just a fact. Look at my poor father; he had 6 daughters. But the difference with him was he encouraged us from when we were kids to fully express whatever we were thinking, feeling, or etc. And he taught us from when we were little kids, he said it to us constantly, always question everything, especially authority. Well, so people used to refer to us as John Rubino's boys, because we weren't your typical little eyelash bat and little feminine girls. If we needed to swing it out on the schoolyard or on the streets, we did it.
That's it. That is it. And that's
so survival. I learned survival techniques as a kid, just trying to survive going to school and coming home every day.
Yeah, same here. That was exactly what it was about. Is people talk about, well, what did you do as a kid and the games you played? And I'm like, to be honest with you, I don't remember the games so much, but I do remember what I had to watch out for, where I had to travel, who I had to avoid.
Right, what time to cut out of school before the next rumble was going to happen.
Oh, yeah, if something big was coming down, you know what? It's okay to...
I would tell my younger sisters to go home and not come back from lunch because there's going to be a big swing out after school. I mean, that's what we lived with. Real bullets flying in the street. That's how I grew up. So, when I look at America today and people want to think this is something new, it's not something new. It's evolved into something even more horrific than what it was.
See, and that has been my contention about all these, the shootings and all that. I mean, people that are not necessarily so aware make the, the statements all the time that this is getting worse, that, it's actually come to here, it's come to there. And unfortunately, and I know this is going to sound really cold, but I kind of smirk at it and I say to myself, this didn't bother you so much when it was in, neighborhoods where the people didn't look like you. This didn't bother you so much when it was in neighborhoods where you considered it, those people who didn't have money or who didn't have the social status that,
right.
It was okay then when, when we were dealing with, stabbings and shootings in our schools in inner city areas, it was fine. And as a matter of fact, the media didn't really report on it. You were lucky if you could get a local newspaper to write like 2 paragraphs explaining to you that, 2 kids were killed in some sort of melee where, there were many stray bullets, let's just say.
Right, right. Well, I lived through, I was probably 18 years old when the race riots were going on in the country. And I remember, we lived in yet another bad section of Brooklyn, East New York, when that was happening. And I remember one night, everybody was burning down the buildings and getting mugs and killings were going on. And I remember looking out the window one night and this huge police van pulls up. And when it opened up the back door, it was like clowns in the circus. There were cops coming out on motorcycles, on horses. It looked like it never ended. And the killings that went on, the ugliness that went on was out of this world. I've seen some pretty ugly things in this country. And, when people say, we're number one, and I'm like, yeah, that's another myth that people need to forget about, because we are the biggest arms dealer on the planet.
Well, look, it only makes sense. We're the biggest arms dealer, we're the biggest drug dealer, we're the biggest, exporter of military forces. The empire must spread in every which direction, right?
Yeah, well, it looks like the empire is pretty much doomed.
Well, and that's another point that I do bring up a lot, and people kind of kick back on me about this, is that, realistically, the average lifespan of, one of the other empires in history is actually a lot longer than what we're dealing with here. We're watching the fall of the empire now, and we're only just over, 200 and something years old.
Well, America is a failed experiment.
Unfortunately, it has come to that. And then, you know what? It was, again, just like many other things, it was really a great idea, but this is the point that we're at. And
think about it. What's the difference between the way America was founded, by coming in and killing 8 million Native Americans, or what Israel's doing to Palestinians who are the true Semites? You know how many people say Palestine was never a country or a land? And I said, any of you ever read your Bibles? There's millions of references to Palestine, even maps. I said, but there was never a state of Israel. Their own God hated them and said they'd never have their own land.
No, Israel was a set of wandering tribes, as far as I read in there.
How much did God like them that split them up into 12 different tribes and then let them move around in the wilderness for 40 years? Okay? If that's a loving God, you can keep him. I rather worship the devil. You mentioned Luciferians earlier. Here's a little factoid that people don't know, and certainly you're never going to hear the Mormon Church admit it, but a little history is that originally the Mormon Church called themselves Luciferians.
Ah.
And then there's a great book out called The God Makers. I recommend everybody read it. So when Romney was running for president, man, I couldn't wait to get Webster Topley on my show with his book about, the dangers of a Mormon president. Because, sooner or later they want us to live under some kind of religious law in this country. And look, if people have religion and it works for them, good for them. I have no use for it. As Thomas Jefferson said, Christianity, I don't see anything valuable about it. He even knew it was a myth. He even rewrote the Bible. He picked out choice pieces and rewrote it the way he liked it. But, people still want to believe, we're a Christian nation. We were founded by, our founding fathers were Christian. No, they weren't. They thought they were starting a new age here. If there was such a Christian nation, then why is everybody so worried about taking in these kids from Latin America? They're only Christian when it's a fetus, when it's a breathing, living kid. Shoot them all. Shoot them at the border.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself, you know, and
Sorry if I got a little wild there. The grandma in me comes out and goes crazy every now and then.
listen, I'm always happy to hear this because, you know, it makes me feel as though I'm not completely insane when I look at it this way. I mean, look, on the one hand, you know, there are people that are immigrating to this country that that we would not want. This is true. You know, the like the right wing sort of you know, discussion about this is not entirely insane because there are people like that getting through. But at the same time, if we were really the Judeo-Christian, you know, value nation that we're supposed to be, this would not be an issue when it comes to a lot of these other people that are coming through, right?
Right.
But this is always like kind of a thing for me where, you know, at the same time, I do support, you know, the idea of, you know, taking in those that can't take care of themselves because, you know, when you talk to people on the ground in some of those other countries, which I'm sure you have too, you start to hear some pretty awful stories as to why they might be sending certain people here, you know, and it seems reasonable. And if you are somebody who really, you know, honestly cares about other human beings, you know, then...
Right, put your money where your mouth is. That's my thought.
There you go.
And somebody put up a poster and said, let's keep the kids and send back all the racists. But, you know, maybe the kid should say, instead of saying, my name is Juan, he should say, my name is Fetus, and then people will care about him.
Wow.
I mean, we live in such hypocrisy in this country that I want to vomit sometimes when I read what comes out of people's mouths.
You know, and that's the other odd thing too, is that, you know, when we look at the sort of lines that are drawn, the you know, the divining rod that is used to separate, you know, the undesirables from the desirables, you ever notice how much that really has a whole lot more to do with some sort of other agenda which is linked to not really even, and I don't even want to blame it on the Christian faith or anything else. It's linked to this sort of, how do I put this? You know, it's like they're all following what they think or what they have been told.
Oh, what someone else told them, not what's coming out of their heart and their own brain, just what someone else told them to believe.
Well, right, and at the end of the day, I mean, you know, the one thing that I always say is to think for yourself, to look into things for yourself, you know, stop just occupying yourselves with, you know, with your Facebook and your games and things like that. Actually connect with other human beings so that you might be able to empathize. You know, and a lack of empathy is exactly what this all leads to by convoluting what people normally, you know, would do in a social way, because after all, we are social creatures. We're meant to interact with one another. We're not meant to be, you know, islands unto ourselves necessarily. You know, I mean, there are times for that. Yes, I understand. And, you know, but at the same time, you know, name me someone who goes through their entire life who never interacts with anyone else, you know.
They die very young.
They die very young. And
see that old people that don't have a social support system, you know, people in their lives die from loneliness. It's just like newborn babies that are not held. They die. You need human touch. You need human interaction. But we're moving towards, you know, a cyber revolution where, you know, I hate to say it, one of my guests, Daniel Estlin, said this is probably the last fully human generation this world will ever see. So the more we have technology, the more isolated our kids get. And you know, as long as they have their gadgets, kids don't even want to talk on the phone. They only use their phone to text. I mean, just look at how, you know, people are willingly signing up for their own servitude.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, it's also prevalent with, like I said, the social sites and everything. You know, and I bring this up all the time, of course, but it's worth repeating. You know, the Facebook experiment is definitely one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen, because after all, you don't need to do surveillance on anybody. They will volunteer just about every piece of information in their lives.
Right. Put all your personal information there. At that, I just want to interject. I just talked about this with Dr. Catherine Albrecht of Spy Chips. I don't know if you're familiar with her work. On my show, which is at the free show link on my site. It's excellent. She not just talks about all the tracking devices in your navigation systems, in your phones, etc., and the dangers of that, but also the dangers of social media and how they get you to willingly give them all your personal information that you would never give somebody in the street if they asked you. But you're putting that on there. And she also said that a lot of the phones, when you take pictures with them, automatically gives a location to the trackers. So if people are willingly giving over, and let's not leave out the selfies and the sexting, now they'll even have pictures of your private parts. So if you've got a tattoo by your penis and they arrest you, they're going to know it's you because they've got your selfies, okay? So people have to think about, is this the kind of world that they want? Because they sell it to you as fun, convenient, and safe.
And meanwhile, let's just break this down for a moment. I mean, look, and I'm on Facebook, so I mean,
I am too, but I use it to my advantage. I use it the same way the spies use it, because I like to see the pulse of the world by how people react to what I post. I know when I post a certain topic that a lot of hate and a lot of anger is going to come, and I wait for it, and there it is. Never disappoints. But it gives you, and people really, some of the things they say to me is kind of cute because obviously they don't know me, okay? They don't know my work, they don't know anything about me, and they might mistake me for a sweet old lady, of which I'm not. So I can throw it right back at them as good as anybody else can. I know the STFU anagrams and whatnot. So, but I use it the same way. I use it to my benefit. I don't post all my personal life and, where I'm at, and I just logged into this restaurant and come and get me. My house is empty. You might as well rob it while I'm out to dinner because I felt like telling you I'm out to dinner. I mean, this is just, people are so ignorant. And, maybe because I grew up in Brooklyn, maybe because I grew up around and somewhat involved in crime when I was a young girl. I mean, you can't avoid it if you're Italian. You're going to know somebody in the, the family. Then maybe date somebody in the family and maybe marry somebody in the family. But that's a story for another show. But my life was married to the mob and Bronx Tale. And we were taught how not to ever give any information to anybody. Everybody's on a need-to-know basis, and you don't need to know. And that was the answer that we gave everybody. You had the law of omerta, I meant basically you never spill the beans on anybody. And now we live in a snitch society where kids are turning in their parents for growing pot. Neighbors are, calling the cops on their neighbor because the one guy had a tattoo that looked like a gun at his waistline of his pants, and she calls the cops on him. I mean, this is not the kind of society or the way that I was raised. Do you know what I mean? It was loose lips sink ships. And the guy who went to jail because he never ratted his friends out, never had to work a day in his life once he got home. He was taken care of. So you had honor in those days, even amongst thieves. But today, it's anything goes.
Well, see, and that's another good point, and this is something else. And I discussed this with Jack Blood actually the last time I had him on.
Oh.
And we were talking about how, listen, at least with the Italian organized crime, the Italian mob, okay, because I view all of these things as different mobs, really. The Italian mob had a whole lot more honor than the existing governmental mob we're dealing with now, than the banking cartel we're dealing with now. At least
Right.
you stood with these guys. And here's the thing. The governments and the banks and everything else, they demand their tribute just the same way. They get their protection money
Right.
just the same way.
But you had more protection from the mafia than you had from the cops, and Italians needed that protection because we were treated like less than dirt when we got to this country. People don't understand Italians' passports were stamped Mano Nera, which means black hand, which meant we were classified non-white, which also limited what kind of jobs we could get.
Right, and this is where the the black hand means more than one thing, obviously.
Oh yeah, but people don't understand the real history. And look, it just seems like in America, every race gets their turn. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
what they did to the Irish, they did to the Italians. What they did to the Italians, they did to the blacks. What they did to them, you did to the Puerto Ricans. Now it's the Muslims. Anybody that looks Arab, they're the new torture the kid on the block. It's a sick rite of passage where everybody in this country, for some reason or another, thinks they're better than everybody else, but they're not.
Well, our humans are supposed to be better than everybody else's humans. You do know that, Maria, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see too much humanity in humans.
Very good, because I see the same thing.
All right, well, you are my son then.
We didn't even
Go forth into the world, my son. Preach it high on the mountaintop.
I am trying. I tell you, I am trying. And, also the Chinese, let's not forget them.
Of course. Listen, I live in Arizona. There's a town in Arizona called Prescott, okay? It used to be the county seat.
Okay.
In Prescott, they have tunnels underground because Prescott was built by Chinese slave labor, and the Chinese were not allowed to be out in the open air seen by the white people. So they had to conduct all their business underground in these tunnels. That's how the Chinese were treated.
Yeah,
and those tunnels still exist, and rumor has it that's where Bush used to meet his finance people in the tunnels there and pass all kinds of money around.
Well, that would make perfect sense, wouldn't it?
Right. So there's some tunnels maybe Netanyahu might want to bomb.
Yeah, why don't we bomb some of those tunnels, right?
Right, because those are the money tunnels.
And actually they might not have civilians right overhead either. That might be a possibility. In parts of Arizona, it might not be populated still. Especially if it was around, where the railroad tracks were laid, because after all, that's what a lot of the Chinese labor was used for.
Well, so blacks used the same way. I got to say, when you look back, you don't know which race was treated worse in this country.
They all had their turn, as you so adequately and eloquently put it.
And it was always the pasty-faced white Anglo-Saxon Protestant bastards. The Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Pierponts, all the bloodsuckers that formed the Federal Reserve and stole our country, that always were in charge. They were living large, and there was one story in that movie I saw where Rockefeller had a mine, and the Italians living in and working in his mine had to live in tent cities with guns over them. And when they got paid, they didn't get paid in money. They got paid in chits that they could only spend at Rockefeller's store. And the first thing I thought of, wow, just like Walmart. Okay, if you work at Walmart, you're making such shit money. The only place you can shop is Walmart. So it's slave labor in another fashion.
Well, not only that, but they give you a debit card now instead of a check even, so you're not even going outside of the place to use it. And it's like the Walmart debit card for employees.
Right, so it's like the chit that Rockefeller gave his slave miners.
It's the same.
You know what I'm saying? And it's always the top 1% blood-sucking reptilian pigs that seem to never die and continue to control the world, control the media, get everybody all excited against everybody else over hot-button topics that don't mean diddly squat in the long run. And they laugh all the way to the bank.
You got it. And another interesting thing, and I know you'll probably agree with this as well. Here's the fun part, is that our little group of elites here in this, hemisphere are actually, not the A-team anyway.
No, they're not. They're just, spoiled, stupid people that inherited a lot of money from their, pedophile, abusing, mind-controlling parents. And they think their shit doesn't stink. But, there's a lot of them. One of them came out about a week or two ago, and he said, we're all going to end up getting attacked by the rest of this country. Our greed is putting us in danger. And they need to start realizing that. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, Gangs in New York. Did you ever see that?
That's actually one of my favorite movies.
Okay, but there's a picture where the rich could get out of conscription by paying $200 or $300. And, you know, the poor, you know, everybody else, the Irish, the Italians, whatever, they had to go into the service. Well, when you remember that one scene where they attacked the rich people in their homes. They just break in their homes and just go whipping and a whomping, robbing and a stealing, and bringing them to their knees. You know, I often think about those scenes when I look at the inequity and wealth inequality in America. And if I was a rich person, I would know sooner or later they're coming for me.
See, and this is why not too long ago, when somebody brought up a question on a different show, they said, you know, why is it that the U.S. Navy is on constant alert right off of the coast of, you know, the coast of our country? Why is it that our Navy seems to be in really close proximity to us on constant alert? And actually, I brought up exactly what that movie was based on, which was during the riots in New York City, the draft riots in New York City around the time of the Civil War. This is exactly what happened. They used the naval vessels to actually attack
its own people. That's why on 9/11, when people say, oh, our government wouldn't kill its own people, I'm like, what planet have you been living on?
Well, that's definitely part of the equation, because, you know, they say, well, they wouldn't turn their weapons on us. Well,
right.
They already have. Even mainstream historians would admit to you that this has already been done. You know.
Of course, multiple times. You know, they allowed Pearl Harbor to be attacked when they had long foreknowledge that the Japanese were going to bomb Pearl Harbor. The only thing the president did at the time was he got his good, expensive new ships out of there and left the crappy ones there. They already knew they won the war in Japan. Japan was already decimated, but it was like, hey, this is a perfect time to test out our new atomic bombs. So, you know, people think they know the truth in this country because that's what they were taught in school, and it was all fairy tales.
Well, you know, and that's why even though I disagree with him on a lot of topics, I really appreciated when Oliver Stone did that, you know, the Hidden History series that he did.
Oh, yeah, it was great. That was a great series.
It was really awesome. And you know, the whole sort of putting in perspective of exactly why it was we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, all of the things that led up to that, you know, the idea of the oil embargo, and despite the fact that we were still trading with the Germans at the time, who were supposed to be the enemies. That was okay, though, because, you know...
We supported the whole Nazi movement. It was all the same families, the same international bankers, you know, the Prescott Bush, you know, his brother-in-law, Averell Harriman. You know, they were tried and been found guilty of trading with the enemy.
Right, they were.
But, you know, nobody knew that when George Herbert Walker Sr. ran for president. If anybody would have known his father supported the Nazis, he never would have stolen that president, and his moronic son get in years later.
Well, of course, he had already really been in power for about 8 years, in my opinion, anyway.
Of course, he was president when Reagan was supposed to be president.
You got it. And, yeah, exactly. I mean,
just like Cheney was president during, you know, Bush the Idiot King's rule.
Yes, he was. And, of course, Cheney goes back all the way to the Ford administration. And, you know, if we remember Gerald Ford...
Another stumbling idiot.
Yeah, Warren...
Listen, since Kennedy was murdered, we've never had a good president.
Oh, and see, again, you're just saying stuff that I normally say.
Well, that was the end. That was the absolute end of people ever electing a president or any hope for this country.
I say all the time that JFK was the last president who was fool enough to believe that he was actually in power.
Exactly. He thought he could change the world. And, you know, people joke around about it, but they say every president since, you know, has to kiss the ass of David Rockefeller, who probably shows them the Zapruder film before their inauguration.
Oh, I guarantee that. I mean, they had a little bit of a stumble there with Nixon because, you know, the CIA couldn't exactly go out and, you know, organize another turkey shoot. So they had to turn around and use their assets to discredit him and pull him out of there, you know, legally.
Of course, even Watergate was a sham. Nixon wanted to reopen the Kennedy assassination. That was his big mistake. Okay? So there was no way Nixon was going to stay in power, let alone he was lucky to stay alive.
Well, that plus he really wanted to dig into the whole Bay of Pigs thing because he was the executive action officer for Eisenhower, and JFK actually inherited that operation. So this was the things that he wanted from Dick Helms, who was the DNC at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And what are you going to do? I mean, they utilized guys who were supposed to be who were instructors even. Some of the guys that were used on the burglary were instructors in black bag operations. Now, you mean to tell me that the foolish mistakes that these guys made, I mean, this wasn't done on purpose? It was a setup.
Yes, it was an so obvious setup. But, it was back in the day when everybody believed everything the TV said to them. And they got away with stuff then. Today, with the internet, nobody's getting away with anything. I mean, look at Israel. The whole world has turned on Israel. The entire world. So they can't hide anymore. Posting the pictures of what they're doing to the Palestinians as it happens is killing Israel. And Netanyahu had the nerve to call Obama and tell him to never second guess him again. To put Obama in his place.
Well,
okay. Now, if Obama sits on his hands and takes that shit from him, he's even more of a pussy than I thought he was.
Well, look, he's only taking orders after all.
Right. Well, they all get paid off by Israel, and yet Israel's economy doing well better than ours, and we're still giving them, almost $4 billion a year that they admit to.
Yeah, right. That's what you can actually track.
Right. And why should we give them any money? Because they say their made-up sky god told them that land belongs to them, and they just go in and mow down the people that are there. That's manifest destiny. That's been the curse of white men since the white man was put on this planet. That's what we did to the Native Americans here. That's what they did in Canada to the Aboriginals there. Look at Australia. They treat their Aboriginals worse than dirt. Okay? People have to get, there is no mandate from any fake make-believe sky god that said the white race is the race. Because if you wanted to even believe your Bible, which I think is all made-up garbage, Adam and Eve were most probably black. Jesus was an Arab, so he wasn't white either. Okay? And when you tell that to people, they get so insulted because, after all, they can't worship a God that's not white like them.
Well, see, here's where I diverge from you just slightly, okay? And that is that I think that there is a storyline that is contained in there, even though I know about the Council of Nicaea and all that. There is a storyline in there, though, that seems to be repeating itself throughout history, okay? There's much historical evidence for the idea that this storyline existed a whole lot longer than 2,000 years ago. So I find the story somewhat valuable because at the end of the day, it really relates to the stars, Well,
I look at the Bible as a very metaphysical book. And you have to understand, the church edited out probably hundreds of books. They picked and chose what they wanted to put in there. Now the Vatican's in a big tiff because somebody revealed a 1,400-year-old copy of the Book of Barnabas, which proves Jesus was never impaled, that he was married and had children. And the church is up in arms over it, trying to make sure we got to validate that it's the real deal. But even with what they left behind, there's a case for reincarnation. There's a case for ghosts. It's just so metaphysical. I don't know how people can't see it. I just had this conversation with a friend of mine. I said, Jesus said, basically, he was a case for reincarnation because he told his followers and then showed the three of them like ghosts, I'm the greater Moses, I'm the greater Elijah, and showed the three of them as ghost figures talking to each other. Okay, you had Joseph who interpreted dreams for the Pharaoh, okay? Mm-hmm. They followed astrology. There was one story where there was a dismembered hand writing on the wall of one of the Pharaoh's temples, okay? I mean, if you look at the book as a metaphysical book, maybe it makes a little more sense.
Well, that's the thing, and again with the context, because I had a conversation on a recent show about the Book of Enoch, and and about all of the stuff that was, redacted. Let's just, use that term for now, from, the canon, let's just say. There's a Gospel According to Judas, which is rather interesting. There is, even within the book itself, there's a lot of misinterpretation anyway. Adam and Eve really actually weren't the original people on the planet, based on what's right there in your King James Version, because there were others. They were the first two in the garden. There were others. So what does that mean? It
means it's all BS. That's what it means. Every story that was recounted in there was written 300-400 years after the fact. Now, Charles, you and I we talked maybe 2 months ago together. I don't even remember what we said 2 months ago to each other. So imagine trying to write about what we're talking about tonight 300 years from now. You know what I mean? Good luck.
And even the closest accounts, I believe. Now, the closest accounts, as far as I'm aware, chronologically, are really from about 30 years after the fact. That's from the closest. Now, if I just go back 30 years, or if you go back 30 years, because you were an adult 30 years ago, I was not, but either way, if we go back 30 years in our memories, believe me, that's been colored by a lot of things now.
Even try to pick up a memory. I only remember the high spots. Was I married? Was I divorced? Did I have a baby that year? But did I say this, that, and the other thing? And did I witness something that I can write in an exact detail now? Hell no. The only thing I can totally recall is the day Kennedy died, because it was a shockaroo, just like 9/11. Okay, I can remember where I was when Kennedy was shot, which George Bush Sr. can't, by the way. And he was a grown man. I was only 13. But to recall in that kind of detail, no, I'm sorry. You would have to have a brain, comparable to Einstein and Stephen Hawking and Tesla rolled together.
Yeah. Well, Richard Nixon is more interesting as far as the day Kennedy was shot, because he's got about 3 or 4 different stories as to where he was and what he was doing when he heard about it.
Right, but think about George Bush Sr., who's clearly identified in Dallas that day, saying he doesn't remember where he was.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I've looked at some of this photographic stuff, and I honestly don't believe that that's where he was. Only because I've seen a different angle on the very same figure, and it seems as though in the one angle, yeah, it does look like him, but on another angle, it doesn't. However, all of that aside, there is a lot of weird stuff going on there, because after all, he calls up and volunteers, to the FBI that, I got this guy who's working on my campaign over here for Congress, who was talking a lot of crap, and meanwhile, this guy was nothing but a rube of some kind who just, really wasn't all that stable. And by the way, before the days of SSRIs and all that, there were actually just regular unstable people that didn't require medications to get there. So this guy was a little unstable, a little unhinged, and they looked at him and just figured he was a harmless nut. That was the kind of terminology that existed back then.
Right.
But there's a lot of weird stuff going on there with
all the players were in Dallas that day.
Yeah,
this is what they do. Just like on 9/11, there's so many different angles to look at 9/11. You got people that say there were planes, there were no planes, there were bombs, there were no bombs, it was nanothermite, no it wasn't, it was an exotic weapon. That's called obfuscation. If you can create 10 or 20 different scenarios, 10 or 20 different conspiracies, people can't tell which one is real. And they do it deliberately. It's part of every false flag, is obfuscation. Just confuse the people, let them run around like a chicken without their heads. Let's do it all. So when people ask me, what do you think? I say, all of the above. That's my answer. And it's always going to be that. All of the above until the government gives us the evidence, which they're never going to give us.
Yeah, see, that's never going to happen. And I mean,
no.
Again, the JFK thing versus the 9/11 thing, there is, you have no expectation that they're ever going to reveal.
And Obama just said no to releasing the rest of the papers on the Kennedy assassination. The president at the time, whenever those papers expire, has the right to say yes or no. He just turned it down.
Well, that's why W turned around and reclassified a bunch of stuff that people like myself legally acquired after the Records Collection Act. He turned around and reclassified it, and here's the fun part. If you try and go to the National Archives, if you call them up and you ask them, listen, I'm a JFK researcher, I have a lot of documents that I acquired from you guys.
Right.
Which ones should I return so that I am, fully within the bounds of the law here? I don't want to be in possession of documents which have been reclassified, gentlemen. I'd like to return them to you so that I'm not, in trouble, right? Guess what? They can't even tell you what to return because it's classified.
Well, it's all for national security.
Yeah, which is a whole other joke.
Right, they can hide behind national security on anything they want, like the Supreme Court hides behind their black robes.
Yeah, again, there's nothing more that can be said about that, except that you're dead on.
Look, I've already told my grandchildren when I'm dead, and maybe long after I'm dead, before you die, they'll release the truth about Kennedy. Please say it out loud so my ghost can hear you.
I hate to disappoint you, Maria. You may have to wait even longer than that because...
I know, I might have to reincarnate a few times before I see that.
You might have to do what I call recycling, because I believe that some of us have been recycled a few times.
I don't know. I hope to God I never come back to this planet, because I truly believe it's Planet of the Apes.
Look, I'm good on it myself. I really see the lesser, and I hate to use the term evolved, but you know what? I don't have a better one. I'm no longer amused by the lesser evolved creatures that I have to be surrounded by.
No, I refer to them as God's special creatures.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I don't know if you ever saw that movie, The Devil's Advocate, with Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves.
Another movie I love, yeah. Because first of all, I love Pacino. So
I do too. How could we not? He looks just like my father. But he has that one soliloquy that he gives about how God is an absentee landlord. Do you remember that scene?
Oh, yes.
And then when that really wicked guy that worked for him is getting killed by some black spirit on the street, and he's talking to Keanu Reeves' character, and he goes, and there goes another one of God's special creatures. And you know what? I've used that line ever since that movie came out.
You know what? I have not thought about that in a long time, and I haven't watched that night. Now you're making me going to have to rewatch it.
You're going to have to break it out. I'm sure you own it. I own it, too.
I do have it, just like I have my, my Godfather collection.
Oh, that's it. I got the best movie ever made. But that one speech where he talks about God being an absentee landlord is historic, and everybody needs to listen to it.
Yes.
And I said, well, once again, the devil makes more sense than what passes for God, especially when you look at all these wars and murders and arguing and fight and suppression of human rights, women's rights, because of God. Okay? I have no interest in a God like that.
Far too often it has been the justification, but I mean, you know what? I really believe, though, and I've said this, I've taken some heat for this too, but if man did not invent religion, he would have found another excuse to do what he does.
Absolutely. Well, Napoleon had said that, how did he put it? He had a great, religion was invented to keep the poor from murdering the rich.
Mm.
And that's a quote by Napoleon. I've always said that man has created God in his own image. Because obviously the God of Israel is just as evil and wicked and smiting as Israel is. So they, you don't know which one came first.
Yeah, I absolutely, absolutely agree, of course. But it does astound me, though, that, and this is why I look at it as almost like, sometimes just like a very large schoolyard, because those sort of illogical and illiterate kind of arguments that are struck up, like let's just say among children sometimes, simply because they're angry at something else, simply because they have a desire to interject themselves somewhere where they don't belong, simply because they are, disaffected at home or something else, it does cause them to pick fights in a schoolyard. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of cases, it just seems like, and I'm not saying this is the case with the Israeli thing, because that is a whole other complex level of evil in my mind, but I mean, just in general, when we're talking about the justifications for warfare, they seem to be on just about a perfect logical parallel with those schoolyard brawls.
Right. It's like a pissing contest.
Even better, yeah, same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and this is again why I say, when I was young, me and my friends used to say, we'd do the math and say, wow, we're actually going to live to see the year 2000, okay? And we had these fantasies of what the world would be like. And here we are at 2014, and it's worse than ever, Technology didn't save us. It didn't make world peace. We're not flying around in flying cars and all the wonderful things we thought we would have. It's really hell on earth.
And that is the amazing perspective there that these millennials are not going to have, is that, yeah, we did have this sort of, and I'm just old enough to still remember that there was that kind of, when we get to the year 2000, boy, it'll be like this. There was a hope. There was a desire that, that first of all, that humanity would get beyond its pettiness, that we'd be able to coexist.
Right, we'd be an enlightened age.
Yeah, not only with each other, but with the planet. We were supposed to be able to coexist with the planet.
Look at the planet today. Okay, I'm glad I'm old and I don't have, forever to live here. If I was 20, I'd probably commit suicide. I look at young people today and I understand why they're depressed. I understand why they're angry. They have nothing to look forward to. They don't have the economy, the economic hope we had when, in the 50s and 60s. You got Fukushima spewing, every day, spewing hundreds of tons of radioactivity into the air, into the water, into the soil. You got fracking poisoning everybody's water. Some big city in Ohio today, out of water because they got some kind of poison algae in their drinking water. You look at this planet and the wars. It's overwhelming what man has done to this planet. The islands of plastic filth in the ocean. I get reports every day. I report on Fukushima twice a week on my show. Starfish gone. Okay, sardines gone. The salmon not spawning. Okay, I want to say pelicans, but no, penguins. Their babies are dying. Okay, they're not growing. And you always see the same thing, the investigators. We don't know what could possibly be causing this. And I'm like, are you people for real? It's called Fukushima. Hello. So you got, death in the ocean, death in the sky. I posted a video of the chemtrails going over my house today. Death in the food, GMOs, death in the vaccines, the medications they give you. We're becoming a sterile population in the United States. What do these kids have to look forward to?
Yeah, that is exactly right. And I mean, and not just Fukushima, but I mean the actual unleashing of that Pandora's box, which is nuclear energy, which I still describe as a Wile E. Coyote kind of method of powering anything. Let's just assume for a moment that it's not just a weapon. At first I thought to myself, as a younger man, that it was just very dangerous, but it might have its, positive uses. But as I got to learn a little bit more about it, it just seems as though it's one of those things that makes absolutely no sense to use for anything.
Right, but, I've been speaking out against nuclear energy for 35 years. They were environmental groups. They called it clean energy. Well, how clean is it now?
Yeah, that's the thing, though. How clean is it exactly? I mean, all we're doing is finding out constantly about this invisible thing, which is basically killing us, because, after all, we did plenty of testing on this planet. We have the power plants that are leaking and dropping stuff all the time that we don't necessarily hear about. You have shutdowns from all sorts of malfunctions, which are barely even glossed over in any media, actually.
Of course. I cover it, of course my family calls me Debbie Downer. But I'm like, what do you want me to talk about? What do you want me to make believe that everything is wonderful? I'm going to talk about what I know.
Right.
So if I'm Debbie Downer, so be it. People have a right to know. You can't see radioactivity. You can't see the radiation. You can't smell it either, but you will die from it. Look at the kids in Tokyo now, the amount of cancers there, the amount of thyroid cancer. The day Fukushima blew, I said it on my show, Japan is finished. And now, they're experts are starting to say, maybe we should test people in other parts of Japan because we have such unusual cancer rates and whatnot going on. And I'm like, what? Are these people as stupid as they look?
Well, it's almost like the use of depleted uranium, in the Middle East.
Oh, yeah, we put them in our bullets because we got to get rid of that somehow.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it doesn't get rid of anything. It just spreads it around.
Of course not.
Of
course not. They couldn't figure out a way to get rid of fluoride, a dangerous rat poison, so they said, let's put it in everybody's water and tell them it's good for their teeth.
Well, after all, that's got its uses. I mean, how else is Hannity going to get viewers? But, sorry. But it's just like that. It is very, very troubling to me because, like I said, I have the millennial kids at this point, and I have the newborn, and that photo that everybody sees that everybody is like locked on with him, where his eyes are so very alert and everything. He was only about 30 minutes old.
Right. I know. I was blown away that he'd even have his eyes open. Most kids don't even open their eyes as soon as they're born.
Yeah, but I mean, but at the same time, I feel...
He looked like Yoda in that picture. I was like, wow, this kid looks like he's got the wisdom of Yoda in him already.
Well, I hope he does because I want him to educate me, Well,
children teach you a lot of stuff, but he didn't pick the wrong parents either.
Oh, I thank you for that. Believe me, because I sometimes question, but I question everything. This is what my problem is.
But that's what you're supposed to do. My father told me that, and he wouldn't have lied to me. One thing I can honestly say is my father never lied to me.
See, that is the thing about Italians for sure, is that we don't like to lie directly to the people we care about, that's for sure.
No, we don't bullshit people. We tell it the way it is. And if they like it, great. If they don't, no sweat. We move on.
You got it.
You know what I'm saying? When I moved out to Arizona, I get the sideways compliment. You're not too bad for a New Yorker.
Nice.
Because they have their own ideas about New Yorkers. And, I tell people out here, I says, let me tell you something about New Yorkers versus the people I've met here. The people here pretend to be your friend because they're afraid of anybody different. I said, but in New York, you're going to know whether a New Yorker likes you or not with the first sentence that you say to them. They're either going to say, come in and have a cup of coffee, or they're going to tell you to F off. They're that honest.
And you know what? It saves a lot of time.
Yeah, it's better than getting a knife in the back 6 months later and you don't even know what happened. You know what I mean?
See, that's the thing. And again, even with the criminal organizations, at least you knew where you stood, and you might have actually gotten some protection out of the deal.
Absolutely. Listen, I knew a lot of gangsters in New York, okay, and I don't even consider them gangsters. To me, they were way nicer than most of the politicians or religious people you're ever going to meet. And they used to tell a couple of jokes, which weren't really jokes. One was, they said the difference between them and the government was licensed to kill. And the other one, which we always used to say, is how can you tell a gangster from a politician? The gangster's wearing a better suit.
And these things are very, very true. Not only that, but I mean, in reality, to me, the more I have, grown in my life, I understand that really, the guys who are supposed to be gangsters and the guys that I've known, the guys I've been related to, the guys, et cetera, et cetera. The point is that really they were businessmen, and to me, in their line of business, as opposed to the politician, realistically, they killed a whole lot less people. That's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely. I had interviewed the niece of Al Capone on my show a couple of years ago. She wrote a book about her Uncle Al. And, if by now you would think everybody would know it, but, he got blamed for the Valentine's Day massacre when he had nothing to do with it. The cops pulled that off. But, hey, let's find an Italian and blame him. And, what all they try to do to pin Al Capone, what do they get him on? Taxes. Okay. So, nothing we've ever been told has been the truth. As soon as you cut the cops and the politicians out of the illegal booze business, they were coming after you. But as long as they were making money on prohibition, life was good.
Well, and this is exactly where we're at with prohibition on other drugs in this country now.
Well, I don't consider marijuana a drug. It's a plant. Okay? That's what I keep telling people. It's a plant. It's a plant that's prohibited by our government. All right? And they don't prohibit OxyContin or all their painkillers or anything that'll give you instant death as one of their side effects. But something that might actually open up your mind and make you think has to be illegal.
Well, yeah, and the other argument there that I've actually gotten from somebody when I've said that, because I say it too, it's a plant, is that the poppy plant is also a plant.
Yeah, and who's that bother? Do you know? You look at the plant that cocaine comes from. In the countries where the plants are grown, those people use those plants for all kinds of medicinal purposes. It's just Americans that always have to take everything to its ultimate limit and cut it with this and mix it with that so they can freak out and burn their brain cells out. But every other generation that's lived on this planet, especially aboriginals, natives of different countries, whether it's ayahuasca, whether it's peyote, they used it for spiritual practice, for spiritual journeying, for medical purposes. But listen, Americans, look, they'll sniff glue, they'll do whatever they got to do. When I was a kid, I remember lots of kids just sniffing glue. How crazy was that?
Or inhaling gasoline or...
Yeah, paint. Now they said, my granddaughter was telling me the latest craze amongst teenagers is they're smoking bed bugs.
What?
Yeah, they're smoking bed bugs. They're supposed to be, they think there's some kind of agent in the bed bug that gets you high and makes you trip. So they're actually smoking bed bugs. Google it. You'll be shocked to find that it's the truth. This is what kids are doing. People, like animals, are always going to try to get high. Even dolphins get high. There's some kind of fish. It looks like a blowfish. They toss it between each other. They take a little suck out of it. And the next thing you know, the dolphins are stoned and they're giggling away. It's natural, okay? Why not be happy? Okay, there's a world that you're so disgusted in. When I see like a big shop like Home Depot, we drug test our employees, and I'm like, man, you'd have to be on drugs to work here. Do you know what I mean? They should hand drugs out to people that have to work these boring shit jobs for minimum wage. At least let them be happy. If they're stoned, maybe they won't see just how sad their life is. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I've got to say that I would be a lot happier with some of the minimum wage jobs I had if I had been given some drugs.
Exactly. And in this world, man, I don't know how people can cope without them. But hey, as long as they're pharmaceutical drugs, Prozac, which is, made out of fluoride. Fluoride is the main ingredient in pretty much every antidepressant. You look at what people are on, and it gives them suicidal thoughts. They, every one of these school shooters, they've been on, psychotropic drugs, legal drugs. Mm-hmm. This whole idea of prohibition is just ridiculous. Never worked, never will. And I'm glad the New York Times came out with that piece last week about how ridiculous prohibition is and to legalize it. But I think decriminalizing and is better than legalizing it, because no one should have to go to jail for a plant or for getting high. Period. End of sentence.
No,
our jails are filled with these people, and it ruins their lives. And the majority of them, guess what, are Black Americans.
Oh well, that's just a positive sort of side effect as far as the controllers are concerned.
Well, yeah, then you put these young black men and women in prison, and you got free slave labor. So it's just another form of slavery.
Yeah, absolutely. And but of course, you do bring up the wonderful point that as long as it's the drugs that are manufactured by the big corporations,
right.
The pharmaceutical industrial complex, then it's fine and dandy. That's for sure.
Absolutely, because they're on the bandwagon to make money, and I don't care what drug you buy. When you see the paper that the druggist gives you with it, listing the side effects. They're not side effects. They're effects of the drug.
They're effects.
Frightening. It's like when you look at the TV and they're advertising, they got people out in a field playing ball and having a happy life. And on the bottom of the screen now, because they have to, do not take this drug if you have hypertension. Do not do this, or you might be at risk of leukemia or a bleed out, or you might just sudden death is one of the side effects. You look at the side effects next to the pictures, nobody's reading that stuff. And it's worse than not even taking a drug. Death sometimes would probably be better than what the medication will do for you. But, big pharmaceutical, IG Pharma, and, all these same companies, Bayer, that supported Hitler, they're still on their genocide, too. So they'll kill you one way or the other. So I always tell people, if man made it, don't use it. If God made it, give it a shot. Well, you got a better chance of something in nature, even a poison mushroom, better than taking what pharmaceutical companies will give you.
Well, right, and after all, Bayer, let's not forget, is the same company that developed heroin as a way to help their morphine addicts get off,
Right, but in the early history of America, like the 1900s, you could buy morphine, you could buy cocaine, you could, get all these drugs in a drugstore. People use this stuff for medicinal reasons. And then, the liquor industry came in, and that cartel put everybody out of business. And who fights against legalizing marijuana? Number one enemy that fights it with their lobbyists is the beer industry.
Well, after all, who would drink beer if, you could go to the ABC store and pick up a bag of weed?
Right, but you know what? There's always going to be beer heads, okay? People should be able to get high by choice. If they want to get high, who cares, okay? When I was a young kid, I just realized whatever somebody wants to do with their own body and their own person is none of my business. If they want to kill themselves, it's none of my business. Okay? You're free to do whatever you want to do. As long as you're not hurting somebody else, who cares? Now all of a sudden we have such righteous people in office, they actually act like they give a crap about us and what we eat, drink, smoke, whether we give birth or whether we use birth control. They don't give a crap about us. It's all about who's lining their pockets.
Yeah, and even previous to the repeal of of the alcohol prohibition, there was even opium was available in a liquid form.
Right.
I think it was actually given by doctor, or is suggested by doctors. It was available over the counter actually as a menstrual cramp symptom reducer or something like this. I forget how they phrased it, but that's
right, but look at Coca-Cola. I mean, their name was because they had cocaine in it. Okay, I get no kick from cocaine. I mean, even Cole Porter wrote about it. But that's where Coca-Cola comes from, okay? And after, of course, Prohibition, whatever, they took the cocaine out of it, so they say. But who knows what other addictive substance is in that nasty shit that people drink. Well, to me, soda is all chemical soup.
Oh, yeah, but isn't aspartame so much better for you?
Well, aspartame's good for you because Donald Rumsfeld's invested in it.
Well, that's true, and he, of course, helped the, get all that stuff by, even though they knew that the stuff was, dangerous and would turn around and metabolize.
They don't care. To them, we're just, as they called it in that movie, No God, No Masters, ordinary people.
Yeah, ordinary people.
We're people that don't have a porch, people that don't have yards, people that don't have servants. We're just ordinary people. The law has always been in place for the rich.
Yeah.
And that's an ugly thing to have to, come to realize about your country when you believe all the, rah-rah, sis, boom, bah. It's ugly to realize the truth, but better to know the truth than live a lie.
See, that's where I've come down on this because, as I said before, and I've said this many times, I mean, I started out life sort of believing that that this country was what they were telling me it was, that we could believe that those who were elected were actually elected. We could believe that that they were our representatives and therefore were acting in our best interest. And if it was time to go to war, it was because something threatened us. If it was time to make something illegal, it was because it was dangerous for the population. The laws were there to protect us. The people enforcing the laws were there to protect us. The government was there to protect us. All these things that I thought as a child, well, I'm sorry, but eventually you have to put away childish things. And unfortunately, the reality doesn't match the story they told us.
Listen, you couldn't have found a more patriotic kid than I was. All right, I got chills when I heard the Star Spangled Banner. Okay, my favorite movie was an old George M. Cohan movie with James Cagney. I forgot the name of it right now, but it was a total patriotic movie. Mm-hmm. And now, the other night, actually, I was out with one of my friends, and in the little mountain town I live in, it's like every other house has a big-ass American flag hanging outside. Even the houses that are shacks, and there's nothing but poverty on the inside. I can't even understand how somebody like that would even want to wave a flag in a country that gives them zero opportunity. But I said to my friend, you know what, I've traveled around the world a lot. I've never been in a country where everybody's flying their flag like the United States. And I pointed to one house where this guy has this big-ass flagpole. And I said, does he need that flag to remind him he's in America? Is that it? I mean, I don't really get it. But, they have to reinforce that patriotism. It's part of the programming.
Well, and you remember, of course, after 9/11, the large amounts of, flag pins and...
Yeah, the stores ran out of flags.
Yeah,
you didn't buy a flag if you wanted to put them. And I remember going outside in the neighborhood I was in at the time. We had a homeowners association, and somebody on the board must have decided to get those little flags. They were maybe 6 inches tall, and stick one in the front of everybody's lawn in the neighborhood. And I came out and I saw all these little flags, and I was like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? And even my old son, he was buying the lie like everybody else, and he's like, Mom, I'm going to go enlist. And I was like, what? He says, yeah, I want to go fight for my country. I said, you better sit your ass down, because I'm about to tell you that before you think of enlisting, I will shoot you myself so somebody you love can shoot you instead of a stranger, because you're not fighting some bullshit corporate war. And that was the end of his thought of enlisting, because he knew I would do it.
Yeah, I believe you would have done it too.
Well, I would have done it because I love him. I mean, I wouldn't have killed him. I would have just taken out his kneecap.
Yeah, something like that. At least he would have been, not
still be alive, and he wouldn't be fighting the bullshit lies, for corporate America. And I've had, people that used to be military recruiters on my show telling you all the lies they tell these kids, and they give them all kinds of promises, and then they know they're going to the front line. So, it's like we started this show, and you're talking about the Israeli soldier, one that died, and I'm like, but he's a soldier. He volunteered for that. Regular people, normal people don't volunteer for that. And it's good to see that the world is waking up and saying, we're sick of this.
Yeah, I mean, even in a recent discussion, we were talking about a study that was done basically describing how that most of the people that volunteer to enlist at this point are usually very damaged in one way or another. The majority of them are. They've been traumatized at some point in their lives, and there's sort of a common link there.
Well, because they teach them to do very unnatural, inhuman things. And then when they come home, there's no VA for them. They got to wait 6 months. There's no jobs. A lot of them have lost their homes, lost their families. Plus, they have PTSD and probably Boris Karloff inside their head repeating the horror to them every 5 minutes. I mean, it's an unnatural state of being to go out as a killing machine. You have to be a sociopath to want to do that. I could understand if we were really legitimately being attacked, wanting to defend yourself like the Palestinians are doing, but I certainly can't see going out and looking for trouble.
Yeah, see, there is a large difference there. I mean, a lot of the people that have tried to that have enlisted in the past, I mean, up to this point in history anyway, I would say that they weren't necessarily, so maladjusted as a lot of people like to say that they were when they were going in. I think that they just bought the lie.
Well, don't forget, they didn't have the kind of killer weapons that kids have today. They didn't see the kind of injuries and heads blown off and whatnot like they see today. You know, it was different. Warfare was different. Or their technology was different. Today, everything's a video game. You're killing people you don't even see. You know, it's just a big video game. Just press a button and blow out of town.
Well, right. And I mean, I was even looking at some of those films. They had that very well-known film a few years ago, which showed the night vision where they were just taking out targets from a helicopter.
Right. I remember
and all that kind of stuff. And it's all become very disconnected. I mean, the truth is, if you had to really walk up to somebody and stare them in the face and shoot them, you know, it would be a whole different kind of thing happening here.
Absolutely.
And
that's the same thing vegetarians say. If you had to slaughter your own animals, you'd all be eating vegetables.
Yeah.
So imagine having to kill a child. I mean, you see the pictures coming out of Palestine of bodies, tons of bodies, little kids, younger than your kids. You know, you're going to tell me those kids are terrorists? They're cute, beautiful little kids whose lives have now been snuffed out because some maniac decided he wanted to do that.
And the injuries also, the mutilations of individuals who for the rest of their lives are going to have to carry that wound, who are going to have to carry the results of this nonsense. You know.
But I'm sure you've made the connection between World War III, which they're pushing for, especially the U.S. pushing on Russia and the Ukraine, and what's going on in Israel. And you have to make the connection that the whole world's economy is collapsing and they have to have a distraction. Whenever the economy gets this bad, it's time for a world war.
Well, yeah, because after all, that's what heals the economy, right?
Right.
You know.
Your government can say, you know, you need to have food stamps to buy food. We're restricting this, restricting that, because now everybody's poor because we have to fight the good war.
Right.
And that's how they convince the poor to stay poor and be okay with it.
It's the wartime austerity for the sake of patriotism. It's the the whole practice there. And you know, it is interesting to me what's going on in the Ukraine. You know, somebody made a joke earlier, but then I thought about it and thought to myself, maybe it wasn't such a joke, that perhaps that missing Malaysian airliner was the one that got shot down.
Well, I thought the same thing. Remember, right after that first one, the 370 went down. There were reports that Israel had a duplicate plane of that in one of their hangars, and people were wondering if Israel was going to save it for a false flag. And then the same airline, Malaysian airline, come on, who even heard of Malaysian airline before this, gets the same kind of plane shot down? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, Israel is the king of false flags. I mean, my thought was Israel and America was behind it. I didn't even have any thought at all that it could be anybody else. And then, boom, Israel hits Palestine.
Right, that's exactly what's going on. And then, of course, you know, another thing is, and I'm only going to dispute this with you really quickly, is that, you know, really, if Israel is the king of the false flag, it's because they learned it from us. I mean, you know.
Yeah, but, you know, they've been pulling this shit for a long time. And, you know, look, I always say if ever there was a case for reincarnation, Israel's it. Because they are no better than the Nazis were in World War II.
Yep, I agree with you there. But I mean, if you even look back as far as you know, like say 1962, when Northwoods was proposed, if you look deeply enough at that particular document,
right?
You know, signed by Lemnitzer, who was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
That was, you know, they just delayed it till 9/11. But you know what else was going on there in the early 60s? Let's not ever forget when Israel hit the USS Liberty, and they damn well knew it was an American ship.
Oh, clearly marked ship.
Right. And I've had, you know, survivors of the USS Liberty on my show telling the story, telling the truth. And they get death threats, and their children get threatened. That's the way these losers, these cowards work. They come after your kids.
Unfortunately, that is also true. And, you know, this is... but it's more of the same. It's more just
like Groundhog Day.
You know, you go from there to the Gulf of Tonkin incident. You go, right. You know, on from there, which was totally fabricated, and right. You know, was
Lyndon Johnson was a piece of work. I mean, I can't tell you how many shows I've done just on him. Talk about a sociopath. You know, he turned back the aid planes from the USS Liberty. He caved to Israel after Kennedy was killed. Don't forget, Israel wanted the nuclear weapons, and Kennedy was not giving them to him. So as soon as they took Kennedy out, Johnson was more than happy to give Israel whatever they wanted, even our sailors.
Yeah, well, that was fine, along with the the prosecution of the Vietnam War, which would not have happened again
Right.
if we hadn't had Dallas in '63. He was beginning to pull us out. We would have been out of there by '65.
Imagine how the world would be if all the money wasted on war went to improving people's lives, went to art, went to music, went to technology, went to real medicine, real cures for disease. What a different world we would have.
We might have that futuristic society that they kept talking to us about for the year 2000, huh?
Yep. I remember going to the World's Fair in New York in, I don't know, maybe 1965.
Mm-hmm.
And they had all these different exhibits of the future. And the future exhibits were magnificent. But it's a future we did not get. We did get the microwave. They did show you that. And they did show you a modern kitchen. That's about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Ooh, refrigerators with 2 doors. Wow, when will that happen?
Well, yeah, we got all that cool stuff, and we got the
we got Fritos.
We got Fritos. That's true. We got the light
Fritos
bulbs.
came out at that World's Fair. I remember that. That was like, wow, a new taste sensation. It was worth going to the World's Fair just for Fritos.
Think about that. We got the light bulbs that don't burn you now. We got those, although
Well, you got those poison bulbs with the mercury in them that'll kill you if you got to have them like disposed like in a biochemical waste field.
Yeah, that was my next.
I have so many real bulbs in my house. I will never put those bulbs in my house.
Yeah, I don't use them either, but because I'm worried about the flicker rates and everything else. Because God help.
And now you got smart meters. When any gadget they give you starts with the word smart, fight it. That's my thought.
And the other scary concept, of course, is the Internet of Everything, which allows things to use electrical conduits to transfer information. Everything is being tracked at this point. Everything is being collected, and I have no realistic sort of belief in the idea of privacy anymore.
Well, listen, my friends call me a caveman because I refuse to have a cell phone.
Right, I won't carry one either.
Right, and I won't carry one, won't use one, won't have one. I won't buy navigation systems in my car. I remember when I had a dog and my vet wanted to chip the dog, and I was like, absolutely not. Nobody needs to know when I'm walking my dog if they want to take a shot at me. People look at me like I'm crazy, but, just because you're paranoid don't mean they're not watching you.
Oh, yeah, like I say. I say this a lot. I really want to apologize to all the people that I used to say were wearing tinfoil hats, and
Right.
The jokes I used to make about the CIA trying to beam things into your brains. You were correct, gentlemen. So, my mistake, my bad.
Right. I think it was William Bloom, who's he must be like 90, and he's always putting out truth about America. And he said something to the effect of what you were just saying about tinfoil hats and whatnot. He says, if you were really aware of what the government is really doing to you, it's even worse than you think.
Yeah, well, what they sanction, what they do, what they push, it's all just poison in one form or another.
Right. Well, that's, I don't understand, and I don't really have an answer to the question. But these people are on a depopulation mission. It's very clear. Anybody can Google Georgia Guidestones.
Mm-hmm.
But yet at the same time, they're anti-contraceptive and anti-abortion. Okay, so I don't even get that. If you want to depopulate the world, why do you fight that so hard?
Well, because that actually implies that somebody makes a conscious decision. See, if you contaminate the food supply the right way and you get everybody hooked on, some sort of petroleum-based, pharmaceutical, and you make sure that everybody thinks that they need all of these big corporations to survive and everything else, you actually have their lives in your hands. All you got to do is contaminate the stream of crap you put out, right?
Right. Well, Iran several years ago modernized and came into the real world and allowed contraception. But what happened is now, where they think they might end up having to go to war, they don't have enough bodies for their army. So now they've made contraception illegal because they want the bodies to use as cannon fodder, or as Kissinger calls them, dumb animals.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't really give a shit about you, your family, whether you plan your family, whether you love your family. To them, you're just a dumb animal that they can use to fight their corporate war.
Exactly, and look, if you're not able to go into war, well, then we can just experiment on you and see how the next wave of crap really is going to work. So, after all, we can do it that way, can't we?
Exactly. Well, I tell people stay away from packaged food and GMOs because it's changing your DNA and not for a good way. So who knows what they have planned next.
Yeah, and the interlocking nature of all this stuff is definitely what we're always talking about.
Right, all of the above.
It's all of the above. When I had a recent caller who was kind of yelling at me, and I went with him on it because I do know that I haven't really done a good focus on chemtrails on my show, and I told him, yeah, you're right, I need to do that. But I did make the point to him that, you know what, man, it's not. The chemtrails are not the biggest issue. The GMOs are not the biggest issue. The pharmaceuticals, the crap in the media, the mind control, all of it is not the biggest issue, because actually every single thing, not individually, is the issue, but all of it together is really the issue, because there is absolutely no side of your life where you're basically not under attack as an individual.
Absolutely. I think there are two issues that make all the other issues moot. One is the environment, because without a healthy environment, human race will not survive. And the other is the real and present danger of nuclear disaster. Those two things make all the other issues almost silly. And nobody wants to pay attention to either one of those two.
Absolutely, because after all, a squabble over a dead planet really isn't going to go anywhere, is it?
No, and there isn't another planet to go to, as far as I know.
Not that we know of. Not that we know of. I got to say, though, that there are many, many days, though, that looking out at my, hate to use this phrase, but my fellow man, I've got to say that I kind of wish there was an option, Maria.
I think the only option is when you get released from this planet. And your soul is free to just say, thank God I'm out of there. And let me make a note to not go back to that planet. Because I think this planet is like the Jerry Springer show of the universe.
That is a perfect way to put it. It is exactly like that. And, reality TV aside, I think that's almost what we are. And I remember seeing, there was a TV show some years ago, and I can't remember which one it was, but they depicted the planet Earth as a reality show. Mm-hmm. Like we were the reality show of the universe. There's really been hidden cameras here all along.
Yeah, like the Truman Show.
Yeah, but the thing is that we never knew it. We were just all dropped off here because they knew that if they dropped off enough of us here, we would all be compatible with one another.
Right. Yeah, that's why when people say, how come if there's aliens, why don't they land? And I said, okay, let's really think about that. If you're a superior race and you're looking at this planet and you say you just check in every 50 years to see if there's any improvement, and there isn't any, it's worse and worse every time, why would you land knowing that the first thing we do is shoot first and ask questions second?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's like the law of the West. I mean, look at cops today. They shoot first, ask questions second.
Yeah, or they, mace your eyeballs out of your head.
They shoot, taser you, pepper spray you, whatever.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
they get to get, disability insurance because their nerves are shot, because then nobody likes them anymore.
Well, after all, why,
So I just say it's Planet of the Apes and the Jerry Springer Show for the rest of the universe.
yeah,
That's the only way it makes sense. When I was younger and you went to school, they actually taught you stuff in those days. And you learned Greek mythology and legends and whatnot. And they would show the gods up in the sky, floating on a cloud, looking at, some kind of picture globe of what's going on Earth. And the lesson was that we were just amusement for the gods. And you know what? To me, that always seemed like it made perfect sense.
See, that's the thing. There is quite a bit of synergy there. It does seem to make a whole lot more sense the more you examine what's going on here.
I know. I mean, how else can you explain it? You can't explain it with evolution. To me, there's no proof of evolution. We get dumber and dumber. The average person now uses 800 words in their vocabulary. They wouldn't even be able to understand the Constitution if they had to read it without a dictionary.
Yeah, well, and what's a dictionary anymore anyway, right?
I know. It's a sad world. It's just the books are also disappearing. I did a show on that this week with Mark Crispin Miller. He's a professor at NYU. He came out with a really good new website called ForbiddenBookshelf.com, about all the books that tell you the truth that are no longer in publication, that you're not allowed to read. They kind of vaporize them. We don't ban books. We just make them go away. So this publisher he hooked up with is reprinting in ebook form all these books about true history, especially of the United States, which are available now at that website.
That sounds really interesting. I want to check that out. Meanwhile, everybody should go to maria.net, because that is where your show is. You blast out the news. You do various shows with other people, including Jack Blood. Are you still in contact with? Oh wow! Now the guy is going to Richard Groves, right?
Oh yeah, Richard's on my show at least once every other month. I have probably 6 or 7 regular co-hosts. Some of them are monthly, some of them are every other month, and they're all great in their own way. We don't all have to agree with each other, but we're all putting out truth, and whether it resonates to you or not, that's your decision. And that's Maria, MERIA.net. Just in case. I don't want anybody confusing me with a nice Maria spelled the other way. Well, it's a sweet little Maria from West Side Story. That's not me. Wrong girl.
No, definitely you're not Maria from West Side Story. But you know what? I don't say that you're not a sweet lady. I love you. I think you're great.
Thanks, Charles.
I don't think there's anything that isn't sweet about you. It's just, here's the problem. The truth isn't always sweet, and that's what you're speaking. And also, if you see her associated with the mouth that roars, that is her, what do you call that?
I'd call that my little moniker.
Your
mouth that roars.
The mouth that roars. And it's amazing stuff, and like I point to, and I know everybody's heard it on my network, because Jack Blood is simulcast on here as well. The Blood and Guts stuff, I always love it when Jack and Maria get together. I'll tell you that.
We always have a good time, and we respect each other. So when we disagree, we agree to disagree, and we move on. And that's what normal thinking people should do. You can agree to disagree with somebody, but never fight amongst ourselves, because that's divide and conquer. We're all trying the best we can to figure out the puzzle that is this world. And everybody brings a different piece to the puzzle. And we have to learn to respect each other, because the powers that be will crush us if we don't.
And it is one of their favorite strategies. Oh, boy. Strategies. Thank you. I trip over my tongue at least 3 times during a show. I didn't.
That's okay. My mouth goes so fast, I don't even know what I'm saying.
I'm constantly trying to get my mouth to catch up to my brain. This is what the problem is. And it doesn't usually work out, people. So sorry about that.
I think you did a great job. You always do.
Look, I really appreciate that, and I got to say that that it's really an honor that you take the time to come on with me because again, you're just one of the most amazing voices out there in the great stream of many, many voices that's out there, and I just I can't say enough. To anybody who's listening to me, for the guys that never heard of her and all that stuff who were telling me, she's really sexy, check her out because although I can't think of her in that way, to be honest with you, because somehow or other, I immediately sort of adopt this childish kind of posture with her because she just has this motherly feel to me. By all means, guys, check her out.
Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know when that was. Doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to have just read two sources.